Why would an HOA so confident, so controlling, suddenly hit the brakes when I mentioned just one name? Not a threat, not a lawyer, just the building inspector. Their tone changed, their demands vanished, and in that instant I knew I'd struck a nerve. But why? What were they hiding, and how deep did it really go? I never imagined that a simple home renovation could spiral into a full-blown showdown with the HOA. It started with good intentions. A few upgrades to my backyard, a new patio, maybe some fencing, nothing extravagant. I submitted the paperwork, followed the guidelines, waited for approval like everyone else. But then, out of nowhere, the HOA slammed the brakes on everything. No clear explanation. Just a cease and desist letter taped to my front door and a string of vague violations that didn't make sense. At first, I thought it was just a mix-up. I tried to reach out, clear the air, resolve things peacefully. But the more I asked questions, the more aggressive they became. It was as if they were trying to push me into a corner, hoping I'd back down. That's when I realized this wasn't just about paperwork or rules. There was something else going on. And what they didn't know was I had a little more experience and a few more connections than they expected. Not long ago, I decided to give my home a much-needed facelift. Nothing extravagant, just some minor upgrades to the backyard, a new patio, maybe a bit of fencing and a few plants. The plan was simple, the budget modest, and I thought I was following all the right steps. I knew the HOA had their rules, and I respected that. After all, I'd lived here for years, and the neighborhood was peaceful, always clean, well-maintained. Everyone followed the guidelines, or so it seemed. The HOA president, Mrs. Thompson, was a strict one, always lurking around, keeping a close eye on everything from lawns to fences to mailbox placement. If anything was off, she'd be the first to make sure you knew it. But I didn't mind. People like her help maintain the neighborhood's charm, right? I'd always thought so, until I realized just how much power she had. As soon as the renovation crew started working, I made sure to keep things within the boundaries of what the HOA allowed. The patio wasn't huge, just an extension of the backyard, with some stonework and a small seating area. I figured I'd be in and out, nothing to worry about. But the moment I received the notice, I knew something was off. The crew had barely finished laying the foundation when an official HOA letter arrived telling me to stop everything immediately. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe they misunderstood something or saw the workers from the street and panicked. I called the number on the notice, expecting a simple misunderstanding to be cleared up. But no, the response I got was anything but casual. The HOA insisted that I was violating new regulations I hadn't been made aware of. They claimed the patio was too close to the property line and non-compliant with community standards without offering any real explanation. Confused and frustrated, I reviewed every document I had submitted. Everything was in order, as far as I could see. I decided to talk to the HOA directly. I called Mrs. Thompson to ask for clarification. At first, she was polite, but when I tried to explain the specifics of the renovation, she got short with me. She mentioned strict enforcement and recent changes in the rules. She didn't elaborate. It felt like she was dodging the conversation. It was almost as if she was looking for a reason to shut the whole thing down. Things started to escalate quickly from there. I couldn't get a straight answer from the board, and every time I tried to push for more details, the response was the same. Vague, cryptic, and always in their favor. It was clear they were holding something back, something important. And that's when I started to realize this wasn't just about a patio anymore. There was something more going on, something deeper. I couldn't put my finger on it yet, but I was about to find out. At first, I tried to play it cool. I thought if I followed the procedures, submitted the proper paperwork, and complied with whatever they needed, everything would smooth over. I figured the HOA had made a mistake, and once I explained things properly, they'd realize they were wrong. But it wasn't that simple. I started by reviewing the HOA's rules and regulations more carefully, but there was a problem. None of their rules seemed to directly apply to my situation. They didn't specify anything about patio sizes, property lines, or renovations of this nature. Instead, the HOA cited vague clauses like general property maintenance and non-compliance with aesthetic standards, whatever that meant. There was no clear reasoning, no concrete rules, just broad terms designed to give them complete discretion over what they did. And then the fines started rolling in. At first, I thought it was just one or two warnings, but they quickly escalated. Every time I thought I had resolved an issue, I'd get hit with another fine, sometimes for things I hadn't even been notified about before. Failure to comply with community expectations. They wrote in bold letters across each new letter they sent. It was clear they were hitting me hard, and there was no room for negotiation. That's when I started hearing the whispers from my neighbors. People had always been friendly, but now they'd greet me with awkward smiles and tight-lipped comments. You know, this happens a lot around here, one of them told me in passing, especially when someone doesn't play nice with Mrs. Thompson. She didn't even need to say anything more. It was like a secret everyone knew, but no one dared to speak of. The more I asked around, the more I realized that I wasn't the first person to feel the wrath of the HOA president. If someone questioned her decisions, dared to go against her, or, God forbid, tried to challenge her power, they found themselves facing the same barrage of fines, notices, and endless red tape. I decided to keep my cool for a while longer, trying to follow their procedures as best I could. I filled out forms, appealed the fines, and requested meetings with the board. But each time I got a response, it was the same: dismissive, unhelpful, and always in favor of the HOA's demands. The more I complied, the more they pushed. It became glaringly obvious that this wasn't about my renovation at all. They weren't just enforcing rules, they were targeting me. The frustration built up as I realized that no matter how much I tried to follow the correct channels, nothing was going to change. This wasn't just about rules or regulations. It was about control, and I had become the target of their unchecked power. I was done being passive. The more I dealt with the HOA, the more I realized something wasn't right. There were inconsistencies in how they enforced their rules. I began to pay closer attention to the houses around mine, particularly the ones with renovations similar to mine. One neighbor, just two houses down, had installed a patio that looked nearly identical to mine. I had seen it approved by the HOA months earlier with no issues. It was baffling. So why was my project suddenly under fire? I began taking notes, comparing the details. The dimensions, the design, the placement, everything matched. So why the difference? It didn't make sense. That's when I remembered something. A few years ago, I had helped a friend with some construction work. Nothing major, just a small renovation. At the time, he was working for the city as a building inspector. We had gone over codes, regulations, and all the little details that most homeowners never think about. He had always been one to dive deep into the technical stuff, so when I needed advice back then, he was the perfect person to ask. It was a random thought at first, but as I stood there on my patio staring at the rules and discrepancies, I realized I wasn't just any homeowner. I had a connection, a pretty valuable one. My friend, the building inspector, had the knowledge I needed to understand exactly where I stood legally. I wasn't calling him to try to pull strings or get any special favors. That wasn't my style. I just needed to understand my rights, to get some clarity on what the HOA could and couldn't do. Was I in violation of a code I didn't know about? Or were they simply overstepping their authority? The questions piled up. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to stop until I had them. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. As it rang, I couldn't shake the feeling that this call could be the turning point. If anyone could give me the insight I needed to navigate this mess, it was him. I didn't know it yet, but this conversation would change everything. I wasn't sure what I expected when I reached out to my friend, the building inspector. But when he reviewed my renovation plan, the results were crystal clear. He told me my patio complied with every code and regulation. No violations, no discrepancies, nothing that would justify the HOA's heavy-handed approach. I felt a sense of relief, but also a rush of adrenaline. I wasn't just fighting an overbearing HOA. I had a legitimate argument, backed by someone with actual authority in the field. But that wasn't all. As he dug deeper, my friend uncovered something even more damning. The HOA wasn't just misinterpreting rules. They were blatantly overstepping their boundaries. According to the city's building codes, They had no right to enforce the level of control they were attempting to impose. They were pushing their own agenda, making arbitrary decisions, and forcing homeowners into a corner without any legal grounds. The sense of power shifted instantly. I had the proof. I had the expert backing. It was time to make a move. I spent the next day drafting a formal email, clear and professional. I outlined everything, my renovation, plans, the building codes, my inspector friend's analysis, and the legal implications of their actions. I wasn't just pointing fingers, I was presenting facts, backed by the knowledge of a licensed expert. To add weight, I asked my friend to review the email and attach his signature at the bottom, affirming everything he had said. I hit send, and the email went out to the entire HOA board. I knew that this would be more than just a regular complaint. It was a direct challenge to their authority. As soon as the email was sent, I could almost feel the shift in the air. The response was immediate. Within hours, I received a flood of panicked emails from the board. They were scrambling, trying to figure out how to respond to someone who clearly knew the law better than they did. Emergency HOA meetings were called. Everyone was suddenly very concerned about the potential legal ramifications. It was chaos. But the real kicker? The president of the HOA, Mrs. Thompson, who had been so sure of her power up until this point, started backpedaling. Her once strong stance wavered as the pressure mounted. She tried to discredit the information, downplay the situation, and shift blame onto other members of the board. But it was too late. The cat was out of the bag. The game had changed, and the board was on the defensive. The fallout from the email was swift, and in ways I hadn't anticipated. After the initial scramble and chaos, things settled down, but not in the way the HOA had hoped. Over the following week, there was an eerie silence from their side. No more threats, no more fines, no more surprise notices. The HOA had quietly withdrawn all their complaints without any explanation. It was almost as if they had never been an issue in the first place, but everyone in the neighborhood knew better. Word spread fast, as it always does in tight-knit communities. I could sense a shift in the air, not just for me, but for everyone. People were talking, finally realizing that this wasn't just about me fighting back. It was about standing up to an authority that had grown too comfortable using its power to control everyone else. The sheer weight of this situation made them see that if no one speaks up, then the rules could be bent, twisted, or even created on a whim, leaving residents powerless and vulnerable. But the real impact came when the leadership of the HOA began to change. The board members who had supported the president's hardline tactics started stepping down, one by one. It wasn't immediate, but after a few weeks, the shift was undeniable. Mrs. Thompson, the president, lost her grip on power. Her once unquestioned authority now seemed fragile, and she could no longer command the same respect or control she once had. Slowly, members of the board began resigning. The once tight-knit circle of power that had ruled over the neighborhood with an iron fist was crumbling, and in its place, a new group of leaders emerged. Leaders who actually listened, leaders who acknowledged their mistakes and were open to genuine discussion. There was no grand gesture or announcement. The changes were subtle at first, but they were real. The HOA began to shift from a body that thrived on control and intimidation to one that actually aimed to serve the community. They took the time to review their policies, especially regarding how they interacted with residents. They started holding open meetings, listening to concerns, and respecting the rights of homeowners, rather than treating them like mere subjects to command. In essence, the HOA had been forced into a transformation they never would have considered had I not pushed back. And while it was not perfect, it was a step in the right direction. I couldn't help but reflect on what had happened. It wasn't just about one victory or one person standing up to an HOA. It was about something much deeper. It was about power and how it gets abused when no one pushes back. How, when systems go unchecked, people in positions of authority can begin to believe they are invincible, that they are above reproach. I could have easily rolled over, followed the rules, and let the HOA continue to dominate my life. But I chose to question it, to challenge it, to push back. One honest conversation, that's all it took. One conversation with a friend who knew the ins and outs of the law. One conversation that led to one email, which caused an entire chain reaction. It's remarkable when you think about it. All those months of tension, fear, and uncertainty came down to a single moment of clarity, where I realized that I wasn't powerless. I wasn't the one at fault. I was simply fighting for what was right. The truth is, it doesn't take much to stand up to an injustice. You don't need to be a lawyer or a seasoned activist to make a difference. All it takes is the courage to speak up, to do your research, and to have faith that doing the right thing will eventually pay off. It was never about going to war with the HOA or making them regret their actions. It was about correcting a wrong that had been perpetuated for far too long. And as the dust settled, I realized that not only had I made my home safe for myself and my family, but I had also helped to make the entire community a little bit safer, a little bit freer. I also realized that the most powerful weapon we all have is knowledge. We often give up our power because we don't understand the rules, the laws, or our rights. But when you take the time to educate yourself, when you arm yourself with information, that's when you truly empower yourself. That's what made all the difference for me. My connection with my inspector friend, the time I spent researching the laws, and the simple decision to challenge the status quo. These were the turning points that led to this victory. It's strange how one moment can shift everything. One email changed the course of my life, and in many ways, the life of my neighbors as well. I look at my renovated patio now and think about how much more it means than just a backyard upgrade. It's a symbol of resilience, a reminder that you don't have to accept things the way they are just because they've always been that way. Sometimes you need to fight for your rights. Sometimes you need to make a stand. And when you do, you might just change more than you think. Looking back, I realized that knowledge is truly power. Yes, having the right connections helped. My friend, the building inspector, gave me a vital edge. But ultimately, it was standing up for myself that made all the difference. No amount of influence or insider knowledge would have mattered if I hadn't had the courage to challenge the system. I could have easily given in, but that would have meant letting the HOA continue to wield unchecked power over my life. And that's the message I want to leave you with. Know your rights, understand the rules, and never let institutions like HOAs intimidate you. They rely on your fear and confusion to control you. But when you stand firm, speak up, and push back, you can change the game. Don't let anyone bully you into silence. Your voice and your rights matter more than you think. Have you ever dealt with an HOA that crossed the line? I want to hear your stories. Drop them in the comments below. If you enjoy real-life stories like this one, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss the next chapter of Crazy Twists.